Now the matches started off double the size. They were put into frames that held about 400. Both ends were then dipped into sulphur and a composite of white phosphorus, potassium chloride, sulphide, powdered glass and colouring. Once dipped on both ends, they were then put into a machine and cut in half. They were then packed into boxes in their hundreds. Now the levels of white phosphorus ranged between 5 and 10. And it was the white phosphorus that caused most of the medical issues. The sulphur was nicknamed brimstone. This is also why the first matches that came out were actually called lucifers. The sulphur meant they could be lit against any surface that gave it friction. Red phosphorus was discovered in the 1840s. This meant that the matches could be made without any white phosphorus. In fact, it meant that the matches could be made without phosphorus at all. The red phosphorus was then put on the side of the boxes, which is what we basically see these days. The match could then just be lit by striking it against the box. In 1897, there were 25 matchmaking factories across Britain that employed about 4,000 people. Men, women and children, a couple younger than 14. Only 2 of the factories had stopped using white phosphorus. One of the big names was Bryant and May, formed by 2 Quakers, William Bryant and Francis May, in 1843. Originally, they just sold general items, but they decided to try their hand at matches and got in touch with somebody from Sweden, a matchmaker, Johan Edvard Lundström. Matches were big business, about 250 million of them were used per day. By 1880 they'd started exporting their matches and they employed about 5,000 people, the majority of them women of Irish descent. This figure went up and down throughout the years, and apparently by 1895 they employed about 2,000. Of well over half of those were still women. They were all paid different amounts depending on their task, whether they were dipping, whether they were cutting, whether they were boxing. All these different tasks, all paid differently, which is fine because you kind of expect that. But on top of that, they weren't paid very much. And they were fined for some things ridiculous. If they dropped something, they were fined. If they had dirty feet, they were fined. If they had untidy workbenches, they were fined. Even if they were talking, they were fined. Lateness as well, which is probably the only one I could actually understand why you would find them. And the women that packed the matches even had to supply their own glue and brushes. Now, as we've discovered in a previous video, probably put it up here or down there or somewhere similar, jaw, which necrosis of the jaw, which is something we've discovered before when it came to radium. Now the white phosphorus did exactly the same sort of thing. If you had the first telltale signs of toothache, you were told to go and get the teeth taken out straight away, or you get the sack. This was all associated with white phosphorus though, not the red phosphorus, caused by the inhalation of the vapour, and it was even worse when it was heated up. Tooth loss, abscesses, necrosis, as again, not very nice. There had been a lot of unrest and activism through the years, with a massive protest when a tax was going to be put on matchsticks. The workers were up in arms. Thousands of them took to the streets. It took Queen Victoria writing a letter to combat that one. She crops up a lot in my videos, doesn't she? They also went on strike in 1881, 1885 and 1886, all about their low wages and stupid fines and the conditions. They had to stand up to eat, and all during their breaks, and in the same room where all the white phosphorus was. Not nice. None of those protests worked. Now the big one's coming, 1888. Famous social activist Annie Besant was getting involved. Not that she knew to what extent at this time. She had discovered the conditions the ladies were working in. The phosphorus they were using was extremely detrimental to their health. Yellowing of the skin, hair loss, tooth loss, phossy jaw. She published an article called White Slavery in England in her weekly paper. This caused issues for Bryant and May. They tried to get the staff members, a small group to start with, to sign a paper that said that actually their work conditions weren't that bad and everything in the paper was a lie. The group wouldn't do it. So they sacked the leader of that group. This was the start of the big strike. Instantly, with a huge number of women deciding not to work, the factory was going down. In a panic, they offered to reinstate that member of staff they sacked, but the women wanted more. They wanted the fines abolished, they wanted better working conditions, they wanted somewhere they can eat, which meant they weren't eating poison every day. They basically just wanted the unfairness to stop. Within days, the whole factory was at a standstill. A group of ladies then went to go and see Annie, ask for her help. That's the first time she realised what a snowball effect her one little article had had. She offered to help and she was there all the way through. It was spoken about in Parliament, and even a group of the women went to Parliament themselves to actually go and speak to the MPs about the situation. By the 16th of July, all new terms were drawn up. Fines were abolished, better working conditions, materials weren't to come out of their own wages, and somewhere better, outside and away from the working environment, to eat their lunch and have a break. Also, a big thing is that the women were allowed to go straight to management if they had an issue. This was something that didn't happen before. They were supposed to go to their foreman first. Now the foreman kept a lot of things from management and they never even got that far. If it had done, maybe some of these things wouldn't have happened already. Signed, sealed and accepted, the strike ended. It took a little while, but in 1901, Brighton and May also stopped using white phosphorus and only the red phosphorus. So ladies were back at work, they didn't have a problem with their working conditions anymore, and the pay was okay.